That's, I don't know what to say. I've got a lot of questions too. So anyway, those proposed cuts, let me get my calculator. I didn't take them out. So that gets us down to about 12 cents.
But
This is my proposal. If you have other cuts, I'm dying to hear them. I'd love to hear them. So that's budget number one.
I'm not trying to be argumentative. I don't understand. You are proposing, what you're cutting is income, but you aren't cutting the expense. What expense are you cutting with what you just talked about? What expense?
The employees, not employees, the 5% raise.
Well, no, we're talking
cutting
about
that.
the next one, the one that you just did, that had to do with the police force. What are you
My
cutting?
suggestion, we're cutting $170,000 out of our operating budget, taking it out of the general fund so that we can take the next year to do our due diligence and try to get a contract with Walden. And if not, we may have to revisit a tax increase next year to make up for it.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that opens up. I mean, we have to look at the percentage of unassigned general fund and how that percentage gets affected before you start taking money out of the general fund.
Right.
The general fund's being brought down. Staff could look at that.
Generally, in terms of drawing down fund balance, one of the things that is pretty much across the board discouraged is using fund balance to fund operations. And I understand this would be a
One time.
defined process, but that still gives me pause, given that scenario.
I mean, I'm okay with that. This is supposed to be a work session brainstorming. I'm not saying I have all the answers. What I am saying is we better leave here tonight having cut some things so that we are not putting our taxpayers at a 35-cent tax increase after 2 years ago doing 32 cents. That's not responsible.
It's
So
also,
that we don't need to argue like my passion about it. I'm saying the whole point of this meeting is to do cuts. You may not like the cuts I'm proposing. That's okay. Propose some of your own. I'm open, but let's figure out how we're going to go from 35 cents or 23 cents with adding nothing from the small budget. Let's figure it out. So I've got some other questions too, if I can.
If I might,
Yeah.
Amy, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
wanted to recap your, I got a 4-cent deduction for the COLA, cutting the COLA, and a 5-cent
Cutting
deduction
COLA.
for the, taking the $170,000 from the fund balance for the police. And I'm sorry, I must have missed something, because you said 12 cents.
The revenue, I was saying we project the revenue going from 1% to 2%, which would save 2 cents.
Okay, and I've got that, so that brings me to 11 cents.
Oh, I did the math wrong, I think.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
Oh, no, a lot lower. Thank you. You know, there's another way. We could not do an $18 sanitation fee. We could do a $9 one, and that generates, what, $332,000. Every dollar that we generate in a sanitation fee is like $37,000. So, and we don't have to just go from here to here. Let's find the balance. Just something that I thought of. I got questions, so. This one is going to be a little bit sticky, but I got to ask them. I'm just. Oh, I think I typed this up too. Again, these are tough, and I think we need to look at, or I just have some questions, let me just start there. So if you go to the MAC tab, these are just questions, okay? Would like to be educated on what these are for. So line 236. Line 236 says public relations. We've budgeted $5,500 for public relations. What is that?
I'm sure it has to do with promoting the classes that they teach
I
there.
think most of it is advertisement. For classes, for performances, and all that.
Okay. And then our contract labor went up 1,000. Do we know what that was?
If I might, we actually decreased it 1,000 mid-year this year in order to,
Decreased it, 15.
so it's not an actual increase, it's actually maintaining.
Maintaining, okay,
Steady.
okay. Other professional services, $2,000. What is that?
I know what that is.
See if we can find, I think we moved, we moved some of the items around, so if you'll see that there's not a line item for that previous years. I think we've moved,
Are we not?
some of the things you use for, whether it's, drawing a blank, custodial services or things like that,
I think
But we
in this
have
current year, it
janitorial.
actually ended up in repair and maintenance of buildings. So while it's a professional service, I think we've had to adjust back
Right.
and forth between those types of categories.
Okay. Again, I just want to
Right, and
understand it.
I mean, there's a lot of that during the course of the year, so sometimes off the top of our head, it's a little hard to remember exactly what an adjustment is.
In a lot of departments.
Okay.
So while that line, so I just want to make a point, if I might, while that line item has decreased $2,000, we had to increase 266 by $4,500. So it's really just kind of a reallocation of the category.
Okay. And then 2,500 on piano tunings?
Mhm.
Okay. And then, what is the travel and training?
280.
Yeah, 280. It's $1,250.
Mhm.
What are we traveling and training?
It's a variety of things. It depends primarily be for the department head. In that instance, it would be MTAS classes on management and administration, and I can't remember the last time she actually traveled to a class, but that's the category for that cost code, is travel and training. So whether
Right.
you're traveling or not, that's what it says.
Yeah, I know, but it went from like, in 2017, it was $50, $175 for travel and training, and then it jumped way up to $1,250.
We've always budgeted it at $1,200. Some years she's not able to take advantage, but if we don't have the funds available when she does have an opportunity, then she can't go. So it's a budget item that, in a couple of years.
Especially over the last couple of years when we've had the state of flux that it's been in with all the repairs and all of that, she hasn't been away from the office as much and has had some other issues that have caused her to be away, so she just hasn't done that much in the last couple of years.
Has it been spent this year, do you know?
I do not know. I'm sorry, looking at this, I couldn't tell you. There's too many.
You don't memorize every transaction.
No, and I'm not trying, like, I want to understand it,
Sure.
and I'm not in any way,
No.
like, well, probably not gonna matter what I say, I'm like, get yelled at for that, but I wanted to understand that. And then when we're looking at, non-resident fees, so, I think we all agree we need to raise those.
Well, did you have a general point from the MAC?
Well, I was trying to figure out what these expenses were because they totaled like 13,750, and we've voted to put a lot, 650,000 total, into the MAC. And so I was just looking at areas where have we not gone back and looked, okay, do we really need 5,500 for PR? What other areas in our departments, rec, anywhere else, is there, I guess, fluff, for lack of a better word, that we might be able to scale back on? So I wanted to understand what that was. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just, if we needed to put money in or out, that's what I'm trying to find out.
What?
I was seeing if we needed to take money in or out based on where you're going with the MAC.
And if I might, another thing that's helpful, I think, in the budget, Amy, if, to everybody, on the summary pages in the front of each section, we do split out salaries, benefits for a total, and then operations and maintenance, which include those things: repair buildings, advertising, travel, training. And if you'll notice, and then we give a total for those three kind of categories. And in this particular case, there is a decrease off of the 18-19 reestimate to the 19-20 budget. So some minor savings have been achieved in that department.
Right, because I think it was like 10,000. Do you have cuts? I mean, I've got more, but I want to hear what everybody else has to say, and then I'll chime in.
Finish, so we can get a good picture of what you're...
Well, when we're looking at budget two, I don't think we paved the roads this year. I think we are that is a one-time fee, this 300, is it 308,000 or 338?
338 on the road.
Is it? What was that 308 that we were talking about?
That was a transfer in and out, and that is exactly why they got picked up, because we had 338, which was the road, the additional paving, and a 308, which is a transfer we actually show as a revenue from state street aid, because we have fronted monies on grant projects. So we're waiting for reimbursement. So we're expecting 308 back in, and in one instance that it was a typo and it was put in as 338 when it should have been 308. But the 338 is the cost of the additional paving based on our last bids that we got in. And that includes, a good bit of milling, and it depends on, the driveway cuts and all of that. So there's more than just coming in and paving the road. There are other things that come in, and Loretta looked at that. And
Which projects were those for, the 338?
It's just the per foot paving cost.
It's like
Oh,
a mile
that's
and a
right.
half, right?
Yeah,
right.
that's not a specific project.
Yeah. And for those, some of you are aware of this, but everybody's not. This 338 that we're talking about is outside of the budget. It wasn't in the manager's proposed budget, so he didn't consider it to be something we absolutely had to do. It's in the supplemental budget, the 338. I know we need
Right.
to. I'm not
Right.
arguing for or
If-
against it right now, but
Because there's 462,000 in
right.
the budget
Because
for
there's something that's being
paving.
done. This is the extra book, the supplemental stuff. So it's something that came out of this. However, because in order to meet our budget for this past year, because of the cost overruns on the James Boulevard project, the council, we were going to be in trouble. So we said, we're going to suspend paving, and we didn't do any new streets this year. So one of the reasons that it makes sense to get the 338 inside this budget is because we do get that last little bit of funding that comes in from the hall tax this year. And if we cover that with taxes, that catches us up on paving, so we're in a good position for next year. The extra thing about the downside of not paving this year, we had the wettest year in history on record for the Tennessee Valley. It was really hard on our roads, and so our roads got messed up more than normal. All that this would do, if we did pull that back in, I'm not saying I'm kind of on the fence on it, and one of my budget ideas, I've got it out as well, but I just think we all need to recognize that that'll come back also, because people don't want their streets falling apart. I mean, that's.
But are they falling apart? Because
Yeah,
if they were
in some
falling apart,
places.
they'd be in this budget. It wasn't, it wasn't. It's a supplemental that puts us not only 700,000, it puts us 1 million over what we got to cut. Like, I'm all for paving the roads. I agree with you, but we're not in a position to do it.
You also have
And the
to,
tax increase is permanent.
Yeah, the cost probably going to go down.
Well, we don't know what they're going to be. We don't have a crystal ball. So,
What were you gonna say?
also understand that this budget was put together really with a target and trying to get it as tight as we could, knowing what knowns we have to deal with haul tax, new firemen, all of that, to get it down to where that's really all we're dealing with. There are some things in this book, and this is the first time I've ever done this, because I thought it was important for you guys to see the breadth of what the requests were and what we were able to do in this budget. There are some things in here, if we had the money, I still wouldn't have put them in there. There are things in here that had we had the money, I absolutely would have put them in there. So just to say that they're not in here, it's hard to categorize all of these things one way, in that I didn't think they needed to be in or whatever. So it really depends on each situation. This budget is about what we had to work with and getting it down as close to that as we could, and ending up at about that $700,000 mark to try to see where we can go. And as I've said, there's never in my mind been any doubt we can discuss additional changes, but my job was to get it as lean as possible on the front end.
And I'll add one other thing, that I think it is responsible for us as a council to at least consider the fact that it costs us less per mile when we do more, because the staging costs are lower. They come up, you get charged one big staging fee, and they do the roads, because this is something we contract out to. So you have to consider that. The second thing is, the cost of paving goes up every year. And when you get behind, it means you're going to be catching up with a higher priced product than you would be if you did it right now. I think we have to consider that. So it's not just that you put it off a year, it actually costs you more when you do it later. So you're cheating. All right, what else?
I haven't eaten. Get some more and say 5.
Can we take a 5? It's 7:58, and we start at 8:05 tonight, so we motion to adjourn for 5 minutes. Everybody turn your mics off. All right. Amy, you were
I know.
finishing up.
I'm exhausted. I'm sorry. Couple things. This was the, I keep going back to the hall tax. I'm sorry, guys, but one of the citizens handed this to me, that this was the state of the town address from 2017. It says tax rate was increased 32 cents per 100 assessed value to cover the loss of the hall tax. So was he wrong?
Perhaps. I mean, that's not a document that's like a statistical document that's drawing off of data to say
I'm just pointing it out.
it's not.
So, let's see.
And we're not dealing, just to be clear, we're dealing with more than just the hall tax here. We're dealing
Right.
with
Hall
debt
tax
service
is
for
a
the fire
small portion,
station.
if it even exists.
Yeah, we're dealing with the continuing cost of the firefighters. We're dealing with the fact that it costs more to pave. Loretta told us at the last meeting, I think she said a ton of asphalt doubled in price. Do you recall, Bill? I think it has doubled in
Right.
price.
I remember hearing that.
So it's not just those things, it's the general fact that it's costing more. And if you take a look at and Boyd did this, if you take a look at what the other governments are doing, they're all dealing with the same thing. We're not by ourselves. Those towns that are similar to ours, which don't have a lot of retail or potential for a lot of retail, are having this kind of issue with the loss of the hall tax and the added increase of what it costs to get things done.
So this is just piqued my curiosity. A citizen handed this to me. They had called Walden sometime this week. And we have, the 338,000 projected for that mile and a half additional as the cost. But Walden just paved Anderson Pike from the W to Taft Highway for 161,000 a mile, which is 241,500 for a mile and a half. So if they, do we need to recontract that, or that seems, how did they get that price and we didn't? I'm just curious,
I haven't
it
looked
just
at their
seems-
bids, so I don't know.
Yeah.
We based that on the last bids that we got, and it's based on the average width of our roads. If you look at which roads we need to pave, I don't recall one of the areas Loretta talked about were the ones where we had waterline work done, and we need to repair those. So you look at the overall width of those roads, you look at how much milling's gonna be required, because if there's gatoring or anything in there, you can't just pave over it, you have to mill that down. That adds considerably to the cost. So the only milling I saw on Anderson Pike was right at the edge where they were tying in. We have other areas where if there's curb and it's been paved over the years and it's going to bring the paving up too high, you have to mill that down or you have to replace the curbs. So there are a lot of things that go into it. So that is based on the areas that we need to pave, the average width of those roads, and the last actual bid that we got. That's how she calculated that.
Right, but maybe worth looking into. That's a pretty big swing. Something to, maybe we ask some questions.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he does, and that's what Loretta does. Do you think he's,
No, I don't.
If we
well, I don't know how to say that without it being awkward. I
You
don't
said
want
it.
to. No, I said, do you think he's not, something like, so how do you say
Right.
that? If you're questioning whether or not they're doing their work properly.
Not at all, even in the least, would I ever suggest that.
Okay. Well,
The
what
only
is-
reason I'm bringing that up is because a citizen brought it to my attention, and that seemed worth looking into.
Right.
And that's what
That's why I'm bringing it to
We-
Boyd's attention.
we will look into that
Yeah.
when we bid it out. That's the process. We put it out. The last couple of years, we've had a hard time getting more than one or two bidders on them because the contractors are so busy.
Isn't it easier to
But
get bids when
basically-
the scope of the job is bigger?
That's right. We have to know what we think we can do before we can put the bid specs together. So we have to have a budget that represents what we think is a reasonable amount for what we want to get accomplished. And then we put those bid specs together to say, these are the roads, because we have to tell them exactly what we're going to do. They're not going to give us a bid based on just a square foot or a linear foot or a mile. They want to know the width, how much milling's going to have to be done, and all of that. So we have to set up, basically, we have to establish what we want to do, get a budget that we think represents that, get that approved, so we know we can move forward with that. Then we build the bid specs, and then we bid it out and try to get the best price that we can. So it's hard to get information on the front end unless you know exactly what you're bidding out and what you're asking them to bid on. So I agree completely. It would be nice to have very comparable data that we could pull from, but we really don't. And again, I know that job didn't require any milling or anything like that. I don't know the width, how that relates to what our average is going to be, but all of that will be considered when we actually bid it out.
Okay.
Anything else?
I'm taking a break. Somebody else go.
Well, I want to get, if there's anything else you're going to add, because it'd be nice if we had a picture so we can say, okay, so here's one proposal. Your proposal right now is, the only thing that I can see
It gets us
that's.
down to 11 cents.
I'm wondering if it really is.
Okay.
If it's, what I see that is concrete in there is cutting the raises percentage in half, and that's 4 cents. The taking from the general fund is not a good idea from an accounting practice. It's not something we would do or should do, so I understand the sentiment, but I don't think it's realistic. And the overestimating, inflating our growth on tax revenue, there's no way I can be for that. It's already been proven. It tried to happen once, and we were lucky that it didn't. Everyone was for it, but then there was something else that changed. If we had done that, it would have been the wrong thing, and I think it's the wrong thing still.
Okay, so how do you want to lower taxes? The
So
proposed tax increase.
if we did what you suggested, if we cut the COLA in half, and we removed the extra paving, what does that bring us to?
Well, we don't have the 2.5 calculated. I can tell you what a 3% will do, but
Okay. I could redo a
Once I put
spreadsheet
my-
here real quick too, if we need to.
I had 117,565 as a number if you,
117.
565.
Oh, and I would, go ahead, did you find that?
no, I'm going to take his word for it for
Yeah.
the moment.
And
I know we talked about
Yeah.
it, but I don't have that right in front of me.
What
And
was
I
the
would-
question? What did you say? Joe,
I think she was asking you something.
No, I'm
what
sorry.
did you say?
That if we reduce the COLA to 2.5% as suggested, that would cut out 117,565.
That's the total. The, and then, so if you're going to do it that way, 117,565.
I did it percents.
And then if you do the
'cause it was- I
338,
did more
Yeah.
palatable. Easier.
can you add that for me, Carol? 117,565 and 338.
That's 455,565.
I would propose
What did she say?
455, 565. I'd propose that we remove the manager's salary increase as well. I would remove everything from the supplemental completely, so that we're just saying, hands down, nothing from here. And the only other thing that we added.
I'll agree with that.
The only other thing that we added was potential pay increase for Boyd, and I think we remove that as well, if we're not giving the employees the full raise. So that takes, I'm sorry about that.
So we're back to 700,000 minus
So
the 117.
what I want to know is, will you vote for that budget?
What?
Would you vote yes if this is the budget?
So if we remove those items, then our shortfall will stand at $700,000.
No.
Minus 117. Because of 2.5.
Yeah, it changes, which is,
582,000.
right.
Oh,
If you deal in cents, it's a lot
numbers.
easier to do the math. It's 4 cents.
Are you talking about deferring the pavement on the roads? Is that what you're talking about or
Yes.
not? Okay.
Well, the additional.
The additional, not what's in the budget, but the additional.
I would vote for that.
And the other ones that you mentioned?
Well, it's everything. It's nothing, it's doing nothing from this book. In addition, I had proposed, since the manager left himself out on the pay raises, that he be included there, but I'm saying take that out as well. And I want to know if our
I am in
goal-
favor of taking this and not doing it, and figuring out how to start from that 700 and go down. That's why I started with, there's a budget 1 and there's a budget 2. Budget 2 is these two combined.
So what would be the estimated tax that you're proposing as opposed to 22.5 or 23 cents?
23 cents would equal the 700,000.
But with these reductions, what would
With
it
the
be?
2.5, it goes down to 19 cents.
Can you verify that, Carol?
Rounded.
Brings it down, according to what I'm figuring, from 2381 to 1981.
And this isn't a vote now, but I wonder, would everyone at this table support that budget?
No. 19-cent tax increase? We haven't cut anything but one thing.
So what else do you want to cut?
We got to come up with that. Our non-resident fees are not correct. Our sport fees aren't correct.
That's not a cut, that's an increase in income.
I know, but it's also, if we're saying that we're,
But you brought up that one thing, I'm discussing throwing in rec fees, then let's talk about it.
okay,
What
well,
would
let's
we need-
back up, because I've already been kind of on the witness stand. What do you want to cut?
I think we should vote on this
You don't want to cut
budget.
anything, except the 2.5.
I think we were presented, I lean towards actually keeping the raise, but I'll vote for a budget that cuts it if that gets us to some kind of consensus so we can get there.
But 19
The,
cents.
I believe
It's
that our,
0.1981.
that our staff has presented a budget that has already cut down to basic operational expenses. This is a tight budget, and I also think that we're setting ourselves up, if we don't do this correctly, we're just making it hard for ourselves again next year. And so let me finish, please. We need to finish our work,
I agree.
being responsible as you look at what's going to happen next year, and also recognizing that next year is an election year. To think that I don't want to raise taxes. No, nobody wants
None
to
of
raise
us will be
taxes.
reelected
Yeah,
if we raise taxes.
No one
that
wants to raise
high.
taxes. So this isn't, like, this isn't anybody's 22%
not
or
about the
15%
election.
or anybody's tax increase. This is the cost of doing business, and this is the responsible thing for us to do as a council to address it and take our licks. But you didn't do this because you want to be popular.
But the responsible thing is to look at cuts, and then we got to do our job next year and figure out ways to generate revenue. I mean, it puts us in a tight spot for next year, and we were all elected to have, we have a fiduciary duty to look at ways to generate revenue, look at ways that we're not continually increasing taxes. So like, you don't have any other cuts, I just want to clarify that.
I don't think we should do any more cuts.
Okay, so
And do you
you're holding
recall-
at 19 cents.
Do you recall
Dan,
that we were adding things to the,
would you just answer the question, though?
I'm not
trying-
ready to answer your question yet. I'll answer what I want when I'm ready to. Do you recall that at the end of the budget session last year, we were adding things to the budget, not taking things away from the budget? Where we are now is where it's where we've driven to over the last 3 years. So now, we need to stop that car. We need to level out what our income is. Our operating expenses are exceeding our revenue. I mean, it's just really simple. It's the cost of doing business has gone up.
So one of our residents suggested the idea of establishing the sanitation fee, but at a $9
Yes.
monthly level rather than 18. I objected to the 18 because it's of its regressive nature, but and if I understood the gentleman correctly, it's like do the $9 sanitation fee and a blended tax increase. So roughly half of the revenue need that we have is made up by the sanitation fee and half by a tax increase. And if my voodoo math is right, that would take that 0.1981 increase down to 0.09905,
How does that?
which might be a little more palatable.
I agree with that, and that was
That's
in
what
the
I've
second
been
budget.
advocating behind the scenes.
Right.
And I know
11
from
cents.
an administrative perspective, it might, bring about more work. But I also think if we do our jobs and we look at a growth plan that's sustainable, that makes sense, and control the things that we can control as a community to try to generate more revenue, then maybe 3 years from now, we could adjust our tax rate. I mean, it doesn't have, that's been done before, hasn't it? When you raise taxes, did you lower them again? I mean, is that,
The only time that I'm aware that that's happened is
was
in
that,
a
I thought I saw that on
reassessment.
a slide.
Right. When there's a
One of the slides.
reassessment.
A
there's
reassessment, that was the word.
Yeah, if there's a reassessment and the overall property values go up, then they calculate a certified tax rate that you should adopt if you stay revenue neutral. So that's when that happens, and it doesn't change what comes in. That's when we did the increase the last time. We dropped 15 cents, the last 15 cents off what was for the high school loan, reestablished that, and then did another 17. So there was technically a 32-cent increase, but it was a felt increase of 17 cents.
Correct. So is it perceived, is it, anyone else have any suggestions? Because I was going to speak.
Well, let's finish this thread on the $9. Staff, any thoughts about that? I mean, nothing comes to mind. It doesn't, it's just another way of doing the same thing. It's not a tax increase, but it is a tax increase. So it's not really changing anything. It's just moving it from one place to another. But if it makes us feel better, I'm fine with that. I think it's a little regressive, but it's less regressive than 18. And the aggressive nature of it I don't like, so it's half as regressive as it was.
My only concern is if we're going to, and I may hate myself for ever bringing it up, but I felt it was important we look at other options. But there are administrative issues with it. And I know some places have moved away from it. But if you're going to fully fund an operation, then doing the billing and collection and all of that, then it makes sense. If you're going to partially fund it, I think going to that trouble makes less sense, just from an administrative perspective. But that's necessarily here or there. It's just, it doesn't make as much sense to me if we're not actually going to fully fund that operation.
And then, from my point of view, we're actually adding costs to that service for those administrative actions.
I mean, it's the whole economies of scale thing when you get into, the cost of the service that you're providing. Do we want to revisit for a minute the whole $19, $18, $16?
It was approximately 18. It would depend on exactly how it was structured, how much we charged for second cans and things like that. So I couldn't put a absolute number on it, but it would be somewhere $18, maybe a little north of that. But
Or are we
that's what it would
abandoning the
take.
$9 based on that?
No, but if we are,
Okay.
their concern is kind of in an economy of scale of this thing, that it makes more sense if you're doing 18 than it does if you're doing 9. So I want to say, let's discuss their concerns. That's what we do.
Well, I had a conversation with Mr. Pruitt over there today to talk about this, and he knows a lot about garbage, being a business owner. He has a grocery store he's got to deal with waste. And his suggestion, or his point about the regressive nature is, I hadn't thought about it this way, but if you have a household of 2 people that live in a house that's valued at $100,000, and you have another household of 2 people that live in a $400,000 house, they're probably going to generate about the same amount of garbage. So maybe a flat tax is a more logical way to look at it.
That's not what regression is. Regression is that the person who has the least amount of
Resources.
the least amount of resources pays the most.
Yes. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and so that's the downside.
The other-
person who's in the $150,000 house, when we looked at where this balanced out, if you did the whole 18 and you looked at home values, you had to get up to about $400,000
Yes.
before the person was paying the same amount as the person with a $150,000 house. And so it's really penalizing, it's all the way down. And that's the regressive nature of it. I mean, it's tough on the people that have less money.
That's why
Right.
we're going to do $9 instead of 18.
But then that doesn't address our budget shortfall. I mean, at some point, we've have to, we've got to,
Well, it does. No,
I mean, it does, part of it.
Yeah, it's just doing it a different way. It's not cutting anything. It's just saying, well, let's just have the people
But
pay the money.
the other suggestion that was brought up is the idea of, maybe bidding out to find out, does Signal Mountain even need to be in the garbage collection service? I mean, could we do an RFP with Republic Waste Management or Allied to find out what they would charge? I mean, maybe it would be less. Maybe they could collect garbage. They're up here every day anyway.
We've looked at that in the past. We could again, but in the past, it's been proven to be far more expensive to contract it out. Beyond that, you'd still, unless we're going to completely close the transfer station and not take anything down there, we'd still have to operate that and have hauling and
Yeah.
landfill fees for that. So unless you completely get out of the business, you're basically going to be paying for the collection, and we would still have to operate part of what we're doing now. So in the past, hasn't been seen as
And it's not,
advantageous.
it's probably not a viable, because of all of that you're saying, to just leave it up to the private citizens to contract for their own waste removal.
No, and I
mean-
mean, it's again, you can come at it any way you want, whether it's a sanitation fee, or it's a property tax increase, or we remove service and you have to pay for it outside of your property
It's still going to come out of
taxes.
your pocket regardless.
The impact's going to be the
Yes.
same, and it's how we minimize that felt impact.
Right, and it's hardest on the
it's
poorest.
hard.
And
Yeah.
it's hardest on the people with the least amount
With
of
the
income.
least to give.
Yeah.
So I understand that too. I'm just trying to
No, it's.
flesh out all of the thoughts and the conversations that I've had over the last couple of weeks.
Right.
And I do feel like, we're at a point, and this is sort of more big picture for where we are as a community. We've kind of at that proverbial, where the two paths diverge in a wood. So one path is to sell off our assets, sell off our precious resources to the highest bidder and put, big boxes and asphalt up here. The other path is thoughtful and it's slower and it could potentially generate commercial tax dollars that we help set the stage for. And we help write the script and we attract the investment from people who are going to buy into what we have to offer because we've got a beautiful product up here to sell. So I would totally advocate and put all of my creative energy to taking that path. And I think that we are capable of doing that up here. So I think if we find ourselves in a shortfall right now, I hope that it doesn't have to be a permanent thing. I hope that we don't have to keep coming back and talking about property tax increases on citizens. I think we're capable of doing it.
If, for instance, part of long-term planning, which you've talked about a lot, if we should be looking at outsourcing of some of this stuff, I think you talk about doing it a year out. So that you then.
At least.
Yeah, so that you do
You
all
have
the
to
work.
gather the information, right? I mean, it's not going to
Right,
fix.
it's not something we do in the budget.
And that's what I'm saying, some of these things I'm talking about are big picture, and they're not really addressing the matters at hand, but this is a good time to be having those conversations, because it is all part of the same puzzle
Well, can we-
that we're sifting, that we're working out.
We, Bob, haven't heard from you on the, it'd be great to hear from everybody on sanitation fee. You like the idea of $9? Is that what you're,
Over 18,
huh?
over $18, yes.
Okay, you like the idea of $9?
I agree with that.
It's kind of where you are. Susanna?
I mean, I don't like any of it really, but I feel like that's a palatable compromise.
Is it, how do we weigh staff's? It would be nice to know what the ramp-up costs are and what the actual cost of doing that is, if that means that you have to have a temp employee or something. How does this affect what we do? If doing 18 is efficient, doing 9 isn't automatically efficient. Doing 1 certainly isn't efficient. There's a point at which you've got to go, this is the efficiency point. And just cutting it in half doesn't give you that. That just gives you a number that humans can digest because it's cut in half. What I want to know is, where's the right number to where it's efficient? And how do we get that answer?
We run the numbers, and we determine, if you're fully funding the process, then, and as we move to a billing system with the water department where we might be able to take advantage of that, then monthly billing will be a lot easier. There's also one mechanism that other places use is billing it annually along with your property taxes, which absolutely doesn't seem to help at all.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to look at those things. And again, the scenario changing, I'll just have to look at it. Again, y'all's call. my position was, and the reason I put it in this way was so we would talk about something other than a tax increase automatically. It's something we haven't done, other places do, but really I never anticipated a partial coverage with that, so I'll just have to look at it.
You know, I'm struggling with the concept that doing $9 versus 18 is inefficient. I mean, if we put it even on our existing quarterly water bills, you know, $27 every quarter for trash service, I don't see how that's going to eat up more administrative time and effort. The water bills are going out anyway, and we're, you know, plugging the payments into the system. So,
And again, we'll just look at that and say, I don't know that there's a dollar amount. To me, it's just a matter of practicality.
I will say one thing that comes immediately to my mind are properties that are not getting a water bill that now will be getting a sanitation bill.
What if it's done annually with a property tax bill?
Then it wouldn't be, I mean, that's the way we do the
It's not really a fee, you're
stormwater.
just raising
Right.
taxes.
There's virtually no administrative.
Yeah.
You're raising taxes if you pay it monthly.
I know, but it's a lot more palatable for paying it monthly than in a lump sum. So you're talking about homes that people that maybe live in smaller homes getting a $9 a month bill versus a huge one at the end of the month, or at the end of the year. That just, to me, and just put it in the tax, which I don't think we should do, but.
It's $108 a year at $9 a month.
I wanted to say one thing to Susanna's point, and I appreciated what you had to say. And I agree with you that we gotta, and I know we're not talking about the big long-term plan, but this is an important conversation to have now, because this is why I'm advocating for, we need to squeeze every bit of juice out of this budget, every little drop, so that we are not, raising taxes and hurting our citizens, because we can't go back. And so if we continue to go up in our taxes, people aren't going to want to move here. And our property values are going to go down. And then our revenue is going to go down. So I think we need to be mindful of that and then do our job. We squeeze it. This is a Band-Aid, right, on a gunshot wound. And the next year, we do what Susanna said. We start that ball rolling. We start looking at ways to generate revenue. But I think in this moment right now, we got to squeeze this lemon, every bit of juice out of it.
Are we
can.
done with all the topics, or I would like to speak? You know, we're coming up, we have 100 years anniversary, centennial, and the last thing I'd like to see as a legacy is a 22% or 23% tax increase. And we're talking about cuts in all these areas except one area, and that's the water department. And unfortunately, just to keep it, we're going to have to do 15% a year for the next 3 years, just to keep it. So the efficiency of that, according to the TML report, is we have deficiencies there. And here we are talking about all these other divisions except the water division. And we're talking about making painful decisions in all directions. And I think it's only fair in this discussion to talk about the water again, because it addresses every single issue we've talked about right now. It eliminates the debt. It was referred to in our last meeting that it would be like selling your house to pay off your credit cards. But really and truly, it's going to be an annuity, because they're paying on a regular basis on those lines every year. They're paying a fee for that. And that fee approaches $100,000 in those discussions that we had. The other thing is all the things we're talking about. It allows us to get back on track with paving. It allows us to eliminate our debt service, which according to this, I'm just a little confused. Is it $389,000 a year or $279
I'm sorry.
on the debt service?
Oh, I have that.
I think 389 is the current.
We're talking about that yearly, and this can make a dent in that. It allows for everything that we talked about, a 5% raise, it talks about covering the employees. We're talking about a $6 million cash infusion that also continues to pay off like an annuity. So that, to me, is not the same as getting rid of your house. It's like buying a long-term annuity that we need to consider in this whole picture. We're talking about life-saving tools the fire department needs. We're talking about the police department pulling their employees' request simply because they didn't want it to get confused with just making a few calls out here to Walden, when actually we're talking about traffic issues with the high school. We're talking about a whole lot of reasons for that additional need for the police employees. So when you look at this long-term approach, this is including in that long-term approach. So I hope that that is also on the table to reconsider, because that addresses more than just, you say, well, you're selling this to a profit-driven company, but that profit-driven company can operate the water department cheaper, get better contract services, and it can also, because they are profit-driven, they're more efficient. And that, to me, means that, you compare government services to private services. Again, I think that this is the answer, and it's been the answer all along. It's just that people look at it as a resource. The resource is not us. The resource is the water, and the water is purified by American Water for the last 90 years, and we're just resellers of it. So we can't possibly, it would be like running a service station trying to compete with your supplier, Texaco, when you're running a franchise. You can't sell it cheaper and make more money than the main company, and the same is true with this. So my answer is not all these other miscellaneous costs and cuts that are not going to be sustainable. It's something that you have to take a bigger picture and look at it this way, and that's my addressing the problem.
Make a proposal.
That we consider selling the water department to meet the needs of this community and operate it more efficiently. Remember, they guaranteed a 21-cent long-term, hang on a second, a 5-year contract on the water for 21 cents.
Not on the riders.
On the, well, let me finish. And by the time we do 3 years of increasing this percentages, we're going to be above what that is. So, they can still offer us cheaper water rates, service it cheaper, and we're going to be at a lower 5-year contract with them than going with this approach to raise our costs, our fees for the water over a 3-year period of time each year. We're still better off having American Water purchase this and address all of these issues long term, because we have no debt going forward. And that is a huge amount of debt to carry on the books every year when we don't have to.
How long
We
have you
could
been on
use
the
that for roads.
How long have you been on the council?
4 years.
How long have you been talking about selling the water company?
Well, in my opinion, people, when they're coming down to make a painful, you got to shell out another 22%, 22 cents, 23 cents out of their wallet. It sometimes takes a painful look at that before you make the decision not to sell the water department. So I feel like that people are at that point in time to where this, if it's not addressed this year, I think next year in the elections it may be addressed when they get tired of looking at the fact that this is not covered. We're talking about how we're going to fix the commercial issues to get more potential sales tax revenue, but we don't have any real direction. We had direction, but we decided not to pursue that direction. And then I mentioned that it was going to be inevitable. It's going to go somewhere else, and sure enough, it went to Walden, which, again, the planning commission turned it down, but they're going to reapproach it, And eventually, somewhere, we're going to have a second store up here, whether it's in the county or here, to benefit it or not. But anyway, going back to the water scenario, it addresses all of our needs right now. And it goes forward because it's paying toward, on a regular basis, for the perpetuity.
It's worth a discussion. I
Well,
mean, I don't know why we're not talking about it.
I mean, it sounds as if we're talking about Tennessee American being the only option, when Walton's Ridge Utility District had a superior offer.
No, they didn't, because they're not going to be paying taxes on the lines going forward. That was not part of their requirements.
And how much money is that?
You're talking close to $100,000 a year, which is no small sum.
I have something that I'd like to respond to about 15 different things you said, but I think we shouldn't do that now. I think we've discussed this. This has been voted on. The council had 2 years solid. I mean, this could have been voted on 5 months ago, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It could have been voted on many, many times. It was finally voted on, and we decided as a council, you two, and I appreciate the consistency of your position, voted against it. You even, and I'm just saying this because this is really what happened, you called the question. I asked you to support why you think we should really sell, and you said, because I think a big company would do it better, and I said, support that. You said, I'm calling the question. So I did not.
I didn't have the budget
I did not.
in my hand either. That makes a
I
big
did not
difference.
shut you down in any way. You know, you shut down the conversation and brought it to the
Dan,
vote.
that is so unfair, because to anybody in the audience, I could have made the greatest argument ever. We didn't have the votes. Like, I just didn't want to spend. Susanna, and you ran saying that you didn't want to sell the water system. You ran saying you didn't want to sell the water system. You've always been clear that you didn't want to sell the water system. So why would I go up there and spend 30 minutes detailing everything? Because no one's mind is changing. So that's why. And so don't say like, oh, I just didn't support it, because that's really kind of condescending to me.
I don't mean to condescend. I'm just.
But that's how it comes across.
And I apologize for that. That's
Thank
not my
you.
purpose. My purpose was explaining how this thing went down, and that we voted on it and we've done it. So rather than deliberate all that now, that's what I'm saying, Bob. If you want to make a motion, we could vote again now that we're going to open that up again.
Well,
I don't-
this was also, keep in mind, and Suzanne, I am not trying to call you out, but you hadn't been through a budget meeting yet. So this could open up other minds, and I'm not saying it has, I don't want to speak for you, but I think Bob's point in just at least having a discussion about it is okay. Maybe everybody's like, you know what, great, Bob, we're still not looking at reopening it. But at least we talk about it.
My job is to bring alternatives to the table, and I'm bringing this back as an alternative because it addresses everything we spoke of in the past 4 years. When the residents are faced with making these bigger tax increases in their property taxes, they might change their minds. And if they don't change it this year, they might change it next year. So it's worth the discussion. It may not go anywhere, but I'm going to bring it up because I would prefer this personally, even if I wasn't, a councilman. But as a councilman, I have to find alternatives to our problems, and this is an alternative.
That has been discussed
And
decided that it was.
And that's fine. I'm just bringing it
Well,
up
we were
as an
looking at this tax
alternative
increase.
because it addresses these problems that you're saying that we got to go back in and make all these other adjustments. And you haven't even discussed the water company as a part of that cut.
Because the water company, we voted 4 weeks ago, that we were not going to sell our water company.
That's fine.
Then,
And-
so it has been discussed. It's been
Well,
discussed for years.
Before we were
hasn't been
looking at this
discussed-
tax increase.
It hasn't been discussed with the looming 22, 23 cents. sitting
When did you
there.
become aware that we were going to need to do a tax increase? That we were going to be short? When did you become aware?
The same time you were.
Yeah.
So, no, I knew this a year ago. We knew this 2 years ago because they've been showing us each year the direction we're going and our revenues from the
And-
tax
and quite
increase.
frankly- and
Please
quite
let me
frankly-
finish. Our revenues did not come up to meet the expenses. The expenses went up faster than our revenues. They didn't match. We saw this coming, so it wasn't a surprise.
Everything that was put into that TML report and all the other reports and the asking for extensions and extensions on not selling the department when the votes were clearly there to sell it were just delay tactics that gave us the same information that we knew 4 years ago, 2 years ago. And that's why I'm bringing it up again. That's my opinion. And I'm certainly, I'm not right 100% of the time, and neither are you, but I'm going to mention it because this still is an answer to some of our problems we're dealing with.
So you guys couldn't have voted that we don't want to do the extension, that we just want to sell the water company? You guys couldn't have done that?
Like I said, we are here at this juncture. I'm not going to sit there and spend time talking about what ifs back in a year ago. I'm just saying that this is something to consider. And if the people want to revisit this a year from now or 6 months from now, this is something to consider.
Sure, it is, but it doesn't change our situation right now that we have a budget that we have to send forward.
It could.
How would this
It
look
could.
as a motion, something to do, like we're adding something or we're taking something out? How does it affect this budget right now?
It could address all those issues.
How could we do that right now?
We could
I'll
table
make a
it.
motion that we sell our water department to pay for these issues. And we can have another discussion. It'll probably fall short, but at least I've made the effort to do that.
Yeah, I think
But
that's
we
fair.
could also,
We have a motion on the table.
will
do
you
we have a
withdraw your
second?
motion for a second?
Sure.
Thank you. I don't think this is something we rush, Dan, and I can feel the emotion coming behind you. I think this is a legitimate conversation, and I honestly don't think we should vote on the budget tonight. There are way too many questions, and citizens are, I mean, my phone's blowing up, my email's blowing up, I'm sure as yours are. We haven't even gotten to, and I have spent hours combing through this the last week, and I didn't get to a lot of it that I really think might make a difference if we're micro cutting. We keep talking about rec fees, and we haven't even gotten to that yet. So one of my questions that all of the council got from Boyd was, what happens if we don't pass it? Doesn't sound like too much. Like we could make some basic decisions today, like we're going to stay at the budget number 1, right? And we could have another meeting. This is too important. This tax increase is too important not to continue to look for ways to either cut, to hear from citizens. We've got people behind us that are chomping at the bit to share what they found. People who do this for a living. We have a forensic accountant in the audience. She can't talk. A forensic accountant. So I feel like it's worth, you know what? I mean, this is huge, the increase we're looking at.
I agree with you. I mean, I think we need to deliberate as much as possible, but I can also say, I've talked to people who are concerned about it. I've also talked to people who say, I'm okay with it. I'm willing to pay a little bit more to live in this kind of community. This is the type of community I want to live in. I like the level of services we receive, and I'm okay. And I also feel like people understand that we want to take a long, careful view at how to generate revenue so that we don't have to depend on these. But in order to get us through this shortfall, I mean, I'm not saying I'm totally excited to be a newly elected council person in my first elected position ever and have to sit here and advocate for a tax increase. But I also feel like this is it's kind of like fighting for the soul of your community. And this is such a deeply personal issue to me because I was born and raised here my entire life. I've spent my whole life here. And so I feel really connected to it. And I'm not saying that my vision or my ideas are the only way to go. I'm just saying that there are a lot of other people whose vision and whose ideas align with my viewpoint as well.
Nothing that we've discussed is a long-term solution to the problem except this.
I disagree.
I'm just bringing it forward.
So do you want to put your motion back out?
I agree with having another meeting with public input. Now, if, to have that public hearing, we have to have a motion on the table to have something to discuss,
No,
then, you know, I'd like to see what people have to say about what they would like to see done. And, you know, we've done all these polls in the past where, you know, you have ideas and inputs and how to handle the budget.
I know you know
on
this.
these other things.
that if we decide on a budget and we send it forward, we aren't voting on a budget tonight. That's not what this meeting's about.
Correct.
This is to get stuff together so that staff can assemble a budget, so that we can have 2 readings and a public hearing, and at each one of those, citizens get to speak and the public hearing, and it doesn't have to pass. I mean, all of that is still to come. This is the preliminary work.
When's our next meeting?
10th. But you're guaranteeing, if we don't do anything until the 10th, that we go into the next fiscal year without a budget. Because it takes that long. It takes 2 meetings in order to get it done. Plus, it takes one ahead of time to get it, you know, so that they can prepare it, so. Am I missing anything?
I think this year it's worth it. It's worth really spending time, however long it takes.
Well, if we have to have another special meeting, we have another special meeting to have a public hearing.
I feel that we're looking for something magic that's going to appear and solve all of this, and that doesn't exist. We have to look at what our expenses are, what our revenue is. We have to make responsible decisions going forward. Is anyone at the table prepared to vote on a budget that has a $9 sanitation fee, nothing from the supplemental, lowers the cost of living by half, removes the manager's bonus? So, does anybody, you think we should move forward with that? Are you guys prepared to vote on that?
I'm not.
I'm not.
I mean, I'm not prepared to vote on the budget this evening, but as far as instructing staff to...
No, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. We could at least instruct staff to move forward with something.
To
I
give
think it
us
would at
something
least
to
give us
discuss with
something
them.
else to look at. I mean, I would just like to see a different proposal, and then maybe we can hash out some more.
Yeah. And that also, I like that idea because it also gives us, what is today, the 28th? It gives us 13, 14, 2 weeks, 2 full weeks, so that we can put it all out so members of the public can see the whole thing and explain everything and see what it is and weigh the options. You know, knowing that it still has to be voted on, and they still get to speak at the next meeting, which is what folks want to do, you know, and that's,
So are we going to have another special meeting as well?
I love meetings.
Well, let's have another
Or we
meeting
could,
then.
why not stay here tonight until we're done? If you have something else that's
Because if
going to
I
change
don't
this.
eat, I'm gonna like fall
Same here.
over. I think we've had this conversation a lot. It's that when we do get to that point where we've met a long time and then emotions run high, brains start getting foggy, and I just think we don't get as much accomplished if we're all willing to meet, and it's really hard for me to meet, and I'm the one suggesting it again. I think it's worth it. I think we owe it to the citizens. We owe it to everybody out there watching. We owe it to everybody behind us because things have been thrown out. There's going to be energy around a lot of things. I'm totally okay with it, if council is.
I'm willing to meet also.
As I said, I don't mind meetings. I mean, I'm fine. But if we vote tonight with a budget to send forward, we can send a budget forward also. We have that option.
And I suppose we could,
Are there 3 people here that are willing to vote on the budget?
No, we wouldn't be voting on a budget. We'd be
On,
voting-
you know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, yeah.
Yeah,
sorry.
I gotcha.
I agree.
See, brain's getting foggy.
What were you going to say, Bill?
sorry?
You were going to say something?
Yeah, I'm just yawning.
You changed your mind.
I'm not. I feel like I just
So
have so many more questions.
we all
So-
have smartphones and smart devices. Let's choose right now when we're going to meet. so we don't have to have any of this stuff. Everybody has something, and everyone has your calendar on here.
I don't have my calendar on here. I have a paper calendar that is on my desk.
Do you know a day?
But I
that
can
you
do I will do the best I can.
I don't have mine, it's in the car.
Well, we're going to have the meeting on the 10th anyway.
So when is the 10th?
And we could-
Let's start there. I can
we
figure
could-
something
At a
out.
regular meeting, we could devote the entire meeting
Let's
if we
do
wanted to
that.
the budget. And public comment.
Yeah, why not? I am definitely available that day. Bob, are you available? The next
I'm
meeting?
I'm gone till the 5th of June.
So you're available the 10th? Is that our next regular, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 4 out of 5, Susanna?
I'm going to attempt to make a motion that we put the budget together where we are now. The budget would be those things that I described a few minutes ago, where
Could you say them
Can I
again?
rephrase them?
you can.
To cut the COLA to 2.5%, no additional supplementals,
Right.
and institute a $9 sanitation, monthly sanitation fee.
Right. And you would then bring to the meeting what the difference needs to be in property tax.
Well, I can tell you that. Hang on. That's a 15.5 cent
As well as
increase,
recalculate how this
basically.
changes the general fund unassigned balance percentage and those kinds of things. Because when you do this, it shifts a bunch of numbers around, and we need to look at all that as well before we decide if it's even right.
And remove my raise.
But yeah.
I'm sorry, say
and
again.
Remove my
board's raise.
raise, because that's not in the supplemental at all.
That was something additional. Thanks, Boyd. That's noble.
I didn't put it in there to begin with.
All right, so I make a motion, we direct staff to put that budget together so it can be considered for voting at our June 10 meeting.
I'll second.
Discussion. No discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay,
Let's do a
2 to 3.
2 to 3, are we clear?
I think so.
3 to 3, so
think
staff
we're
moves
good.
forward with that.
Voted.
And we can also have another meeting, well, you guys were talking about having it on the 10th.
So we're going to do the 10th?
So we have a meeting on the 10th, and the public can speak.
Do we need to vote on that?
No, it's the regular meeting.
That's going to, but isn't that going to be our special meeting?
I'm,
But we'll have citizen input?
I think a special meeting should be a special meeting. Your regular council meeting should be a regular council meeting, so citizens have a chance to do what they do. So we get committee reports, so we get a manager's report, so we get up to date on other things. And there's probably other business that we may need to attend to that we haven't talked about, and we can't just keep putting that off. Our regular meetings should be regular meetings, is what I'm getting at. Because we missed one on top of that, this month, we missed our second one.
I disagree. I think we should have it on Monday.
Should, you
We
disagree?
should, I disagree with what you said. I think we should do our regular meeting as the special called meeting on that Monday, because we all know we can be there.
What's the
Citizens are already
difference?
planning an extra meeting.
But it's not an extra meeting. Monday, the 10th is our regular meeting.
Right, and I'm saying that should be our next budget meeting, the second meeting, the third meeting we're going to have, fourth. Is it fourth? Fourth.
We're going to be doing that. We're meeting then. But it's not going to be a special meeting, it's going to be a regular meeting where citizens are allowed to speak.
Right, and I think citizens should be allowed to speak. Am I saying this wrong?
Yeah, I think
Didn't you
we're-
propose that
Yeah.
we have that instead? And I'm agreeing
Just
with you, Bill.
Try to focus the entire meeting on
Right,
budget.
and are you saying something different?
I'm saying there will be a few other things that
Right.
will probably need to be on the agenda
Right,
because
and
we
I'm
missed the meeting.
disagreeing. So I don't have to be more clear.
Is it something we need to vote on?
Probably.
I don't think so, but
His direction of council is to incorporate a work session period for the budget into our regular meeting.
That's what Dan's saying.
It's,
I'm saying suspend the regular meeting and let's have another one of these where citizens
so,
can talk.
we just voted to direct council to present a budget at the next meeting for potential first reading. That, and we, by the way, can have 2 public hearings if we want. There's nothing that says we can only have 1. So we can have a flat out, I'll make that motion now. If that's what you guys, it's the only difference is we have regular town business that we need to conduct, that we need to keep up with. And we missed our second meeting this month. So that would be putting us, going a long time without a regular meeting.
I get it. I just disagree. Like, do whatever you got to do to decide the meeting. It's okay.
So nothing changes. Well, we can call it Pete if we want to. It's just a meeting where we're going to talk about the budget and do regular town business. It's not like we're changing anything. We're just I'm making sure, I think citizens ought to
I
be able
think
to
we're
speak.
making it a lot longer by doing that. We don't need liaison reports. This is more important. I think we dedicate it to the budget and we have citizens speak. Absolutely. I think maybe they should have spoke tonight, but.
We can open that up right now if you'd like. We have that option. We're just trying to conduct.
Well, I think it's unfair because a lot of people have left too. If we didn't do it in the beginning, we shouldn't do it now.
Okay.
As much as I want to hear from everybody here, but
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn.
Council, no, the meeting's technically over, but you guys have the debt management policy? Did you get the debt management policy? Take a look at that, because sometime during this, we have to discuss it.